Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So I'll be teaching you all how to sew this beautiful gown you see right here on the screen. It has an open back with two bold elastic. It has an elastic waistline. It is also a milkmaid gown in front, and it's so stylish, which can be worn to casual outings or to a normal reception. So if this sounds like something you're interested in learning, continue watching and let's get started. So I've assembled all the materials I'll be using to create this gown. So the number one on the list is my elastic. So I have two sizes of elastic here, and this black one here is almost 1 inch wide. It's about 3/4 of an inch, so it's almost 1 inch wide. This will be for the waist area and also on the sleeves. Then this bolder elastic I have here, which is white in color, is almost 2 inches wide, so it's 1 inch and 3/4 inches wide. So I'll just set that aside. So this fabric I have here is about 5 yards, so I didn't use up everything at the end of the day. I have my ruler, my scissors, my chalk, my pin and other things. So I have my pattern paper, which is white in color now, all spread out. So I'm going to go ahead now to start drafting. I'll mark a line at the top part of my paper and label it my shoulder line. All my measurements will be starting from there. So we all know this is an off shoulder gown, so I'm just going to subtract my neck depth. So the neck depth I'm working with is 7 inches, so I just place that 7 inches on that first line, which is my shoulder line, and I'm marking my 8 inches, which is my chest line. I'll mark 10 inches, sorry, which is my bust point, 13 inches my under bust, then 16 inches, which is my half length. So I don't want to go ahead to start drafting a half scale basic bodice. I just had to subtract my neck depth all at once. Okay, so after extending all these points to a straight line, I went ahead to label them as well. So I'll come to my shoulder line. My shoulder divided into two is 7 inches, but I'll subtract half of an inch from the 7 inches. So my shoulder line, I mark 6.5 inches as my shoulder because this is an off shoulder, right? So my bust circumference, I'm going to divide it by 4. So what I have, I'm marking it right there on my chest line. And now I'm going to create my armhole. So I'll just connect these 2 points from my shoulder line to my chest line using my armhole on this curved part. So I'm just basically going to divide my nipple to nipple points of 7 inches into 2. So I'm marking 3.5 inches on these lines I have right here, and I'm connecting them together. At both sides of this my dart leg, I'm going to mark half of an inch away from that dart, and I'll connect it upwards towards my bust point, but it's not really going to get exactly up to my bust point line. I divided my waist circumference by 4, which is 8 inches. I marked it on the line labeled HL. Now I made a connection from my waistline to my chest line. I'm replacing my dart of 1 inch, which I marked earlier, and this is all for it. So the next is to also mark my stitching or sewing allowance. So I normally go with 1 inch or 1.5 inches as my stitching allowance. So I've marked this now, and I'll use my free hand to connect this. So if you're not used to using your free hand, you can also use your ruler to connect your stitching allowance. Okay, so now that I'm done doing this, I'm just going to start marking 1.5 inches from the center front of this my paper. Then I'll extend that mark I will make right there from my shoulder line and stop exactly on my under bust. Do you understand? So now I've marked 1 inch, 1.5 inches. I'll rule it, and that line I'm ruling will stop exactly on my under bust up to my shoulder line. So when I did this and got to this extreme end, I went ahead to label this, and altogether the marks I have right here is 6 in total. So I'm done drafting for the front part of this gown. I'll go ahead now to cut this out from the half length or from the waistline. So I've cut the base, I've cut the sides, and the next is to cut the armhole and also the top part, which is on that shoulder line. So this is what I have. So from this my under bust line, I'm also going to separate these two pieces exactly from the under bust. Okay, so I'll close up this that I have for this other part. I'll close it up and use my pin to pin it, or you can use a sealer tape or a masking tape, whichever one that is available to you. So when I do this now, this is what I have for the upper part of this gown. This is the front part, so I'm just going to keep that aside so that I can draft up for the back part of this gown. So I'll also bring a clean part of my pattern paper. So I'm going to consider that top part of my paper as my shoulder line. I subtracted my neck depth of 7 inches just as I did for the front, and I marked out my chest line, my bust point, my under bust, and also my half length, which I'm going ahead now to connect into a straight line. Then I'll also go ahead and label afterwards. So for this particular back part, I'm not fixing any zipper or any form of that. So I also divided my shoulder into two and subtracted half of an inch. I marked it on my shoulder line. I got the quarter of my bust circumference. I marked it on my chest line. Now I'm creating my armhole as well from my chest line to my shoulder. So I'll get my waist circumference divided by 4, which is 8 inches. I marked it right there, and now I'm connecting this to my chest line. I'll also mark my stitching or sewing allowance of 1 inch, which I also use my free hand to connect. So this is basically it. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to determine how wide I want the opening at the back of this my dress to be. So from the size of this my pattern paper, I'm marking 3.5, okay, 3 inches, sorry, inward. I marked it on my bust point line and also on my waistline, which is my half length. So I didn't start marking it from my stitching allowance of 1 inch. I started from my actual measurement. Okay, so just take proper note of what I'm doing right here. So I connected it now into my armhole point. So I'm just going to measure what I have now. That's the distance from my center front of my paper to where this line I have. So on the waistline on my half length, it was 5 inches. Then on my bust point, I had 6 inches and quarter. Okay, so from that center front to this line, you can see where I measured this out. Okay, so when I now took note of the inches I have left, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this out from the base, the sides. I'll cut out the armhole, and lastly slash this line. Okay, so this part where I have my inches labeled is the part that I'll be using. This other part will no longer be useful. Okay, so this is my back piece of my gown. So now I've cut out the armhole, so this is what it's going to look like. I'll quickly go ahead and cut out all of these pieces on my actual fabric. So after cutting out, this is what I have. So for the cup area, on that part where I marked all of this from my shoulder to my under bust, you can see what I have. I slash and also spread. This is a milkmaid. I believe you're familiar with this. And between each of this paper, what I have is 2 inches spaces. So please, on the armhole, please don't slash it at all. It's not really going to come out nice. Imagine slashing your armhole. You're going to extend your armhole to be so long. So when you get exactly on these points right there, you just go ahead and cut this out. Okay, just stop exactly at that point. I was not supposed to slash this. Okay, so this is my number 1 to 4 that is slashed. The other numbers I have are unslashed. I have my stitching allowance of 1 inch at the top part and also at the base of this my cup. Then for this other part of my front part of my gown, at the top part I added 1 inch, and the base as well I added 1 inch. So don't forget that all of these pieces I cut them out on fold. Okay, so I believe my explanation here is very clear. Don't slash the armhole area. Okay, so this is it. And for the back, this is what I have, and I have 4 pieces. My fabric is serving as the lining and the main fabric. I have this half inch added to that part and also 1 inch at the base. So I aligned it with the front part of my armhole. You can see it's aligned here, and don't forget we are cutting out on fold. So this piece I have here will be serving as my elastic casing. It's about 6 inches wide and is about 26 inches long. So before I cut out the length, I had to measure out you know, the back part we had 6 inches and quarter, so I multiplied it by 3. That was how I got the length of my band for the back. So for the front part of this my gown, I slashed now open this cup area I have right here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this paper which I have right here so far, so that I can start joining. So now I'll separate this into two. You can see it's 2 pieces. So from the straight part, on this straight part, I'll go ahead and fold this twice and stitch it down. Then when I'm done stitching it down, I'll also go ahead and also fold the top part twice. So for the top part, we'll be creating a channel where our elastic will be passing through. So if you're familiar or you know how to go about your milkmaid, this is just exactly what I'm doing. This one is just straight. This type of milkmaid, the top part is just straight, it's not curved at all. Okay, so after doing all of that, this is what I have. So I also have this gather stitch at the base of this my cup. So I also have my gather stitch right there. So this is for the other side of my front dress. So it's folded into two. I notched the middle. So before I'll remove this paper I have, so I'll open this up. You can see that notched part. So now I'm going to gather this cup area at the base from this middle of this my piece to towards the ends. Okay, so just continue watching. All right, so I'll get one of the ropes or the threads I have for my gathers, and I'm going to start pulling this. I have series of tutorials on the detailed process on how to go about your gathers. Okay, so when I must have done that, I'm now going to get the middle or that folded part of this my cup and pin it on that notch part of this my other front piece. So I'll arrange this properly to make sure that it aligns, or everything I have will align, you see, at that part with this other piece of my dress. Okay, and it's going to align as well at the sides. It's not meant to be bigger. Okay, so go ahead and continue doing this and adjust this until it fits properly. So this is how I'll go ahead and do this, and also pin before I go ahead and stitch this down using just half of an inch. And don't forget that this is right sides facing each other. The right side of my cup is facing the right side of this other piece I have right here. So after stitching, this is what it's going to look like on the right side. When you must have stitched for one cup, you go ahead and repeat the same thing for the second part of the cup. Okay, so pull on your stitch and also gather it around here and stitch using just half of an inch for the both parts of your cup. So I also cut out this my rope for our milkmaid, which I'm going to also pass through from that channel I told you earlier that was created, where our rope will be passing through and not elastic. I made a mistake actually. So this is how you're going to do this with the office pin. When it comes out from the other end, also pin it, which I will stitch when I go ahead to my sewing machine to do all of this. Okay, so right now I've done this for the two parts of my cup. You can see how it looks like on the wrong side, and this is it on the right side as well. So I'm not lining this particular dress. Okay, now it's a free dress. It doesn't need to be heavy. Like, you can use any free or light, very lightweight fabric. Okay, so I just tied this up so that it can just be one piece. So now this is the casing for our elastic. I folded into two and I stitched using just 1 inch. So you can see 26 inches long. Remember that the distance I have between the part I cut off from my center paper was 6¼ So when you open it up, you know it was on fold. When you open it up, it's going to be 12 inches. So if you multiply it by 2, I think it's going to be around 26 inches. I don't know if I'm mistaken, but just multiply it by 2. Okay, so now I'm turning this now to the front part. After stitching, I have 2 inches now as the width or wideness of this my casing. So here's my elastic, which is not exactly up to 2 inches. Like I said, it is 1 inch and 3/4. Okay, so I'll be passing it through this my casing I have now for my elastic. So it's really proper for you to have your casing for elastic 1/4 or half of an inch is quite much, maybe 1/4 of an inch wider or bigger than your actual elastic. Okay, so as my elastic now is 1 inch and 3/4, my casing is 2 inches. So this is how you're just going to pass this through. Secure it at one end, pull this, make sure that it's not so tight. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm really stretching this, so make sure it's not tight. Okay, because you don't fix any zipper to the back part of this particular gown. So you can see how I'm really stretching this to ensure that it stretches very well. And another thing depends on the type of elastic you have with you. So when I was done, this is what I have, and if you look properly, you will realize that one is longer than the other one. So this longer one will be at the top part, the first part, sorry, the first band, the first elastic band, that is the first one, and the shorter one will be at the waist area, and the longer one is about 3 inches longer than the shorter one. As you can see, I measured it out right here. So we'll continue with the sewing parts in the second part of the tutorial, because this was getting quite long and I want you all to assimilate better. I'll see you in the second part of this tutorial. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope to see you in the second part of the tutorial. Have a lovely day ahead of you. Bye.